change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
Hey there, we're back for another episode of the Fundraising AI Podcast. I just decided to hit record because Scott and I were going to go too deep in all the things, and then you're going to miss out. So we wanted to actually do this, and it's actually fun to be back here 2 weeks in a row, Scott, because we've had so many different interviews and then been traveling a lot. So 2 weeks in a row, we're able to kind of track the progress of what's going on in AI. And, you know, to the casual observer, maybe there's not a lot, but for you and I that are just inundated with all this stuff, it's like, feels like weeks have gone by.
Yeah. And there's always just, even if there's nothing in the news, like the conversations are still going on. And the reason we haven't recorded in 2 weeks back to back is the conference, the season is starting to slow down, right? So you're home, I'm home, it took some time, but just reeling back from all the conversations that we're having when we're out, when we're speaking to at sessions, and then the conversations between, like, there's still just as much anxiety as before.
Yeah.
Even without anything new in the news to add to it.
Yeah, the stuff in the news is still ongoing. The whole thing with Mythos and Fable that we've already talked about. There's some developments there as well. But yeah, most of the conversation I want to talk about today came from just other organic conversations that I've had, one with my neighbor, one with a group that I was doing a webinar for yesterday, and then another one, a friend who was just sharing how she has started closing major gifts using AI just to kind of prove that it can be done. So let's start with that. I mean, I don't know how your week has been. My week has been, it's only Wednesday, but I've already done how many, 3 or 4 like training workshops this week. And then I have another one right after this. So it's been really interesting. In fact, I yesterday did something that was really rare for me, which is actually a 2-hour kind of hands-on demo to a group called Faith and Fundraising from Association of Christian Fundraisers. And it was awesome. Like, I usually don't do it because I usually speak on, you know, the bigger picture and like where we're going and why and how you evaluate it. But I had done that with this group a week ago for 2 hours. And then yesterday for 2 hours spent time, literally I started with NotebookLM. Only one person only knew about NotebookLM because I shared it last week. Then I went into ChatGPT and I showed deep research. I showed thinking versus non-thinking, image generation. And then I went into Claude and I showed desktop, the cloud view, and also the Google kind of login. And I could tell, like, honestly, like people's heads at 2 hours, I was like, all right, you are all empowered with this information. You can't unsee what you've just seen. Like, go and do. And I thought it was interesting. So I think the conversation today, or part of the conversation today, is around agency and what separates those that do and don't. It's interesting because I think you and I were talking about this a few minutes ago, is that we've been doing this for so long. We've seen more people become aware of what AI can do and then choose not to do it than we have. It seems to be a little bit the exception of the person who just becomes super AI curious and then starts like just crushing it within their role and then outperforming everyone else around them.
Yeah. And I think after sessions, like the people that I hear from are those that maybe more recently jumped into it, right? Or like recently had a breakthrough and are like, oh my gosh, I can't stop thinking about it. And I think those that have maybe are a little bit more apprehensive, they probably shy away from the conversation, right? And so if, you know, you're talking to 200 people at a conference, at a session, and then you only have 3 conversations after, that's a lot of people that are varying degrees of apprehension.
Yeah. And I gave the group credit yesterday for showing up. These are people who didn't really know what they were signing up for. They were apprehensive about it. But just by showing up and showing the initiative to actually like lean in, learn something, become curious about what it can do and not do. Like one of the people toward the end, I was, you know, I did check in. I'm like, how are you all feeling? And this one woman was like, oh my gosh, she's like, I just wrote down like 3 pages of notes of things that I want to do. Like 3 pages of things that I want to test out and to see what I can do with this. And so much of this, and I use this analogy a lot, but so much of it is, I don't think people realize that These are tools that are just a set of tools that, like any tool, you have to use it and experiment with it and find out what it's good at and what it's bad at to actually be proficient at it. There's no shortcut. You can't listen to this podcast. You can't read a book. You can't do it any other way other than like do that plus like dedicate that time to spend 30 minutes to 60 minutes a day just playing and experimenting, and then find out what the tool is actually capable of doing and how you can like open up your imagination. And then the other part, which you and I train on a lot, is like to really be successful in AI, you have to step away from AI entirely and step away from it so that you can dream and wonder and exercise your imagination of not just doing more work faster, but reinventing the work that you're trying to do from the first place.
Right. Because I'm sure when you do these trainings, it's not like you're not going into their specific roles, their specific tasks. It's more what you're showing is the capability of tools in a general sense, right? Like digging deep, but also like varying what they can do, but also showing like the mental process that goes into it, right? And being able to translate kind of maybe ambiguous roles or tasks or just things that are just done like on autopilot, translate that into steps to break out and then leverage the tools to bring in at various points.
Yeah,
Right?
you know, and I don't know about you, but I have found it not harmful is a strong word, but not helpful when I actually say, hey, prospect researcher, they should do this, and a grant writer should do this. Because in fact, by saying, showing those case studies, which you and I both know, everybody wants their case studies. They're like, but yeah, but how are you using it? And I think that limits your imagination. By me showing you a specific use case, it actually does you more harm than saying you need to play and go imagine. So my approach actually to that exact point yesterday, over the last 2 days, I've had a sequence of different projects I've been working on. One of which is an article that I put off for over a year. It's actually the longest standing, very long Apple Notes thing that I've added to for probably a year and a half about the environmental impact of AI. And you and I have talked about this. I've promised this article so many times, and I'm like, I'm not going to write it because it's divisive. But I reread my grandfather's book this weekend, Crisis by Consent, and it just inspired me. I'm like, I have to, because you and I every week will do a webinar and someone will say, well, yes, but what's the environmental impact of AI in every prompt? So I decided, because this has been a kind of a long going, very iterative, clunky kind of thing, I just decided to share my exact process for doing this. And so I showed them my Apple Notes. I showed them my prompt, which is just a mess of me in a voice dialogue for like using whisper flow for like total brain dump back and forth. How I take that, I kind of work on the format of an article. I take that, I put it into Google Docs, and then I hit play so I can listen to it while I'm reading it. Then I put that back and how I consolidate my notes. I think it was actually really helpful because to anyone on the outside, so much of that is inherent knowledge or inherited knowledge. Like we've learned these processes, which are so weird and nuanced and feel super messy. It's like, you know, when you're going to clean your room, you make it worse. It looks worse before it gets better. Like that, I think for a lot of people is the uncomfortable part. Like it starts to get messy and you're like, I don't know what I'm trying to do anymore. Like this just doesn't feel right. It feels counterproductive. I'm going to stop and I'm going to just go do it myself. And so I literally just used several of my own. I actually used ChatGPT for personal things where I'm like, you know, what kind of tree is this? And when should I harvest my sunflowers and whatever? So I showed some examples of that. And then I showed just literally guided everyone through the exact process. And then, of course, NotebookLM and how I use it to distill information and figure out, like, you know, what is the salient points of what I'm trying to communicate. Yeah, so I don't know. It was an interesting test for me. Hopefully, I don't know if we'll see if they ever invite me back again. But I think the first 2 hours that I had with them a week ago probably made them cry because it was like, oh my gosh, AI's changed everything. Yesterday may have made them cry again just because it was like, oh my gosh, like now I have the power to do this. And it's on me. Like it's actually at that point when you see it, you can't unsee it. You've just seen what it can do. It entirely becomes upon you to actually activate that or actualize it in whatever work you're doing.
Yeah. It's funny because I hadn't shared this with you, but I've been thinking about trainings. It's been a while. My last training that I did was Association of Independent Researchers or Research Institutes in like September or October of last year, right? So it's probably been 8 months. And I was thinking like, okay, well, that conference is coming up. I've gone to it for the past 3 years. Like, would I do a similar training again? But the landscape has changed drastically since September of last year, right? Like, and there was no co-work. There was nothing like that. So, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that use case is so useless now.
Right.
Right. Like I did something similar. Like I walked them through multiple tools on one use case and how they all kind of feed together and have different and like showcase the strengths and weaknesses of each.
Yep.
I'm like, if you're not talking about agents, then like how are you even providing a benefit?
Right.
But I think you sharing this reminds me like agents is all the exciting stuff, but it's also, what would you say, like
Right.
0.1% of the people in our space that are using AI are using agentic work. And that's probably like the software engineers and developers that are, you know, at our two companies that we're more commonplace thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Like typical person in fundraising is not worried about engineers or maybe worried about it, but not interacting with it or leveraging it. Cause like maybe it's not a use case right now.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's like there's enough that they could do with the tools readily available.
Right. Yeah. You know, I think walking people through a day in the life, kept on joking. It's like, this is literally a day in the life of my last 2 days. And the only thing I showed them that was outside of that was like, look, just for an example of like an agentic workflow or an agentic, to see agentic in action, I actually took the website for ACF. I opened it in Chrome. I attached Claude to it. And I asked Claude to take that organization and then to build out an AI masterclass, basically a deck, like create an entire deck from this organization about an AI masterclass on how to amplify impact. And, you know, when you're watching Claude do that, and it like, I'm like, look, my hands are right here. I'm like showing my hands and I'm not touching the computer. And you see the mouse moving, you see the thing moving, and it's like, okay, got this. Now I'm going to do that. And then you see a window pop up and it's Google Slides. And literally within like a few minutes, the slide deck just comes up. I think people are like, so that part, even though you may not do it today, you can't unsee it. And you've seen what it can do, like hands off. You're like, okay, like next time I do a project, hopefully it will like, you know, trigger something in my brain. I'm like, I wonder if AI could do that, which is cool.
Just unlocking the potential and capability, like there's something here worth testing out. Yeah. And then it's up to me to figure out how I'm going to make it applicable for my work.
Yeah. So everyone has agency. It's on you at this point. I think that's the whole thing that we're trying to get across is that you can, what is it? You can't lead a horse to water, or you can lead a horse to water, but you can't get them to drink. It's like everyone has been led to water, anyone who's seen these things. So it's really on you. And I think it's always just so ironic. You know, we'll talk about the environment in a second, but I think it's always so interesting, like the excuses of like, I just don't have time. I don't have time to learn something new. But we know, because I speak on this a lot, the average person scrolls 300 feet on their phone a day, which is the same height as the Statue of Liberty, 300 feet on their phone a day. The average person has 4 to 5 paid streaming subscriptions, between 4 and 5. So you have time, you have agency. It's whether or not you have the discipline or desire to actually do it. And if you don't, totally fine too. Like that's like a choice. But at that point, that's what agency means. It means that you have been given the opportunity and you're making a choice.
Yeah. You can still scroll 150 feet a day.
Right. Yeah. Right. And still feel like you got all the useless knowledge.
And then using AI will give you more time to scroll more feet. Like,
right.
It all works.
Exactly. It all works. Just have AI scroll for you, which not a bad idea. So the only reason I brought up the environment, because the environment for you and I think we talked about this last podcast, right? That you and I literally on every single webinar that we do. In fact, I'm doing one today with the Chronicle of Philanthropy. And one of the things that they wanted me to talk about is both ethical concerns that say employees have ethical concerns of the organization using AI, either based in like societal challenges and what AI represents or environmental challenges. And those are like the two big things that we see. It's going to either increase bias and increase inequity and inequality, or it's going to harm the environment. So I did decide to write this article, and I think it's been really healthy for me to go deeper in it. Again, it becomes around agency. And one of the things that struck out, or I don't know, popped up for me is that when we think about the agency we have to offset our carbon footprint, you talked about this last time, whether you're vegetarian, whether you offset your carbon, your miles or whatever, your carbon footprint doesn't have to be neutral. Like, I'm like, what am I doing just to be neutral? But what could I actually do to be plus? Like, you know, whatever percentage. And so article's almost done. Actually, I think I'll finish it today on a flight and we'll see what everyone's reaction to it. But I think it's a very complicated, nuanced thing. And you and I were just talking before this, which models that exist today that are built on renewable energy. And there are some. There's the one in Switzerland, which is actually a very famous model. It's actually now been like democratized for their entire country. I don't know. There's one with HP, and there's about 4 or 5 that are now built running on almost entirely renewable energy. So this is why another thing about agency, people are consumers. Individuals who spend money on these products are consumers.
Yeah.
And either, investing in the stock market for companies that are not using renewable energy, that is a vote, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not investing in those companies, but investing in spending money on companies that are, and making your voice known is actually really important.
And it's also no longer a barrier.
Right.
Like now you can no longer say, I'm not doing it for this reason or for this reason. Like there are options available to you, and there's going to be more options available as time goes on. And people are trying to solve this problem because it's a problem for everyone, right? It's just there's some early adopters there in making it more renewable energy. So there's going to be more options for us to be able to go this route, and it's just removing that as a barrier to not getting started.
Right. Yep. No, exactly. The other thing, there's like 2 other items that I think are interesting that happened this week. One is an article that went viral called The Third Wave of Philanthropy, and it written on Substack. It went viral in the way that I thought was surprising. In fact, this is I don't know how much, a few thousand word dissertation on how companies through their IPOs, because that's been the big news of the 2 weeks, is both OpenAI and Anthropic are going to IPO, that it's going to create so much wealth for the individuals that are at the front end. And some of that wealth will likely find its way into the nonprofit sector. And when it does, this article basically suggests that the nonprofit sector is not capable of essentially spending that money or spending it well. And in fact, the third wave of philanthropy needs to look a little bit more like Silicon Valley in terms of the professionals. There's a talent shortage, and the talent needs to come from Silicon Valley. Now, this was sent to me one night last week, and of course, I read it, which I usually tell you when I send you an article, I'm like, hey, here's an article, but don't read it before bed. At least I tell you that. This one, I didn't have that warning, and so I read it before bed. Then at 3 a.m, I woke up thinking about it. I woke up, and then at like 5, I reread it, and I became more concerned about it. Because I think what it did was it basically, for me, one is because it went viral because of the people saying, yes, this is totally true. The nonprofit sector is broken. They don't know what's going on. They don't know how to ingest this kind of money and use it well. I think it's a completely unfair bias. I mean, of course, I spent almost 2 decades in the nonprofit sector, and I see a group of people that can make something out of nothing, that can do like tremendous good with few resources, that given the resources, that they actually could like activate those better than someone else. And the other position on this was that the article is written almost completely uninformed by anyone in the nonprofit sector. So yet again, there's these big like political and public demonstrations of what philanthropy is, but philanthropy has been left out of the equation and not consulted with. And so we see more and more of that. And so it's just an interesting paradigm this week, and especially on the heels where Giving USA came out yesterday, and it looks like a net increase because the stock market has been doing really well, did very, very well in 2025. And so philanthropy is a net increase, but still fewer donors. So it's like the same exact data that's existed for the last 20 years is like net increase, or at least 2.1% of GDP, but there's a decrease in the number of people giving. So it essentially, Giving USA ends up being a symbol or a barometer of inequality in a lot of ways, because it just represents essentially more money coming from less people every year over year.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of like, I've been in the nonprofit sector fundraising for 15 years, mission side for 5 years before that. Like, there is no group of people more committed to what they're doing, right? Like, there are countless studies of limited resources, of people wanting to leave the sector because they're overworked, underburdened, but like, they still show up every single day, right? It's not easy work, but making the commitment, making the impact that they're making drives them to continue to do that work, even if they get someone outside of the sector saying, well, what are you really doing? Like, how do we need to change this? Because the work that you're doing doesn't matter. You're not making an impact enough. Like, there's just no one committed, and being able to meet with those people, talk to those people, and see the impact that they're having is just so rewarding for us to continue to do what we're doing.
Yeah. And I'm not saying there's no place for this. And in fact, in the article that I wrote in response, even suggested that the nonprofit sector's, the formal 501c3 is not necessarily even the best vehicle in every situation. So I'm not arguing that it is. In fact, I think B corporations in some areas actually have a stronger chance of increasing impact because they have access to capital. And so they can actually scale far better than a nonprofit. But not to just dismiss the nonprofit sector lock, stock, and barrel because the people don't know what's going on because they haven't built like the kind of empire that Silicon Valley has. And remember that I started .com in 96, 97 before the bubble. And I saw just complete nonsense. And a lot of the nonsense in terms of like valuations and how things are in the .com era are happening today with AI. It's not that indifferent or different. And then what happens when all of that reconciles? Because at a certain point, everything reconciles from an economic perspective and the dust settles and fewer are standing. And those that were like, oh, we're going to do this and make an impact will very quickly change their view on what's important because they're capitalistic motivations. I mean, you can't expect a tiger not to act like a tiger. Like, why would we expect a tiger to also act like, I don't know, whatever. You're always good at like the other analogies. A teddy bear, I don't know, whatever it is. But it's like we put these labels on and we're like, look, it's not true to the nature. Like, let something actually operate true to its nature. Now, of course, it should be governed by values, but organizations that are essentially determined or dictated by the stock market will have to act predictably in the best interest of its shareholders. No.
Yeah.
Anyway, wild, kind of crazy week with that, the environmental impact. And then the last thing, this is just more on the technical side. And I don't know, you and I both understand this really well, too well, because we've lived it. But there's a technical aspect of what happened in AI this week that I think it's super under the radar. And I don't think most people will have any idea why this is important. So I'll try to describe it. So my neighbor and I already shared the story with you. Neighbor's a brilliant AI leader. And I was over at his house, his pottery studio, because I do wood turning, he does pottery. So he was literally like turning clay and showed me some stuff that he was just been turning that day. And we were talking about the different models. We're talking about, he loves OpenAI and he loves Codex. And he's like, Codex is better than Claude Code in certain things, but Claude Code's better in certain things. And Gemini, whatever. And he's like, I just found that like, I don't use one model for any one thing. Like for the complicated tasks, I'll kind of pick it apart. And I'll be like, okay, Codex, you do this portion. Then I'm going to throw it into Claude and you do this portion. And then I'm going to throw it in Gemini, you do this portion to find out that there's no one model that's best for every circumstance. And immediately, like it just reminded me of so many conversations you and I have had back in early days of predictive AI. When we built our first model and it was hard coded, like do you remember, like, I forget how many lines of code, like 10,000, 15,000 lines of code, just math.
Yeah,
like that
came
very
across
first
the
model.
binder that had the summary of all of it. Yeah, I gotta show it to you next time I see you. But yeah,
the math was so complicated, right, that you couldn't like run lots of these tests. So you're like, okay, we're going to build one model, and then it's not going to be the definitive one. We're going to continue to adjust that model over time. And that was essentially because it was expensive and there wasn't a lot of options. That was the way we operated. And then we really came to that realization is that there isn't one model that's best for any one data set. And in fact, if you tested in that case, like an XGBoost and one version of XGBoost against something else, you'd be like, oh, this model performs better in this circumstance, but this model performs better in another circumstance. Then it became a best practice to basically say, look, let's just grab as many models as we can find. And in that case, for us, it was like 1,000 models. And you can have all those models compete against each other to find out actually which ones are better for the data set, and then not settle on one of them, but take the top three and then essentially combine them and average them. And that is, Google really created that process around data science and being like, that's the best practice still today. And as soon as John was telling me this, I'm like, oh my gosh, you just did, and you're doing manually what we learned through machine learning and like what became the best practice. And I kid you not, I leave his place, go back to my place. 2 hours later, I get a text alert or Google alert for like a new thing that came out. And this thing called Sakana Fugu comes out. It's a model that basically does exactly that. It literally realizes that, in fact, it came out because it showed that Sakana Fugu, which is not a AI model, it's a process, can perform equally as well as Claude Mythos, which is now illegal and banned in the United States. It can perform as well by not using Mythos, because what it does is it looks at a prompt and what it's trying to do, in this case, like crack encryption, and it says, okay, well, Codex is really good at this little part, and Gemini is really good at this part, and DeepSeek is good at this part, and something else, and this other Claude model is good at this part. And it literally picks apart the prompt and then farms it out, all the best parts to the different models, and then brings them back together and aggregates them. And I'm like, this is exactly what we went through. Like, this is exactly what we went through in predictive, and it changed predictive forever. It hasn't, predictive didn't go back to the old way. This is literally like how all predictive now works. And then I'm like, wait a minute, like this changes everything for ASI and AGI and ASI, because we've always expected that artificial general intelligence or superintelligence will be created by one company, who's ever fastest. It will either be China or the US, and it will either be OpenAI, or it'll be, Grok, or it'll be ChatGPT. And I am now completely convinced it won't be any of those companies. It will be an aggregator that lives in the middle,
all the best,
that is just going to use all the things. Like, it's going to use 1,000 different models that exist in the world, and because it will find such a nuanced way what's best at what thing, and then AGI will be created by that. And so I am like, it kind of blew my mind. So this is like I know it sounded technical, everything I just described, and if you have questions, like, we can slow roll it, or we should just create a NotebookLM out of this. But this completely changed my paradigm on the future of generative AI and AGI and ASI.
I mean, I think that, and also going back to what you were saying about the environmental impact, right? Problem, like, people are burning the most capable models that they have access to for some very simple tasks, just because, like, they want the most power and whatever, and like effort. So if this tool can also offload very simple tasks to like the easy, like the GPT 4.0 or whatever, right? Like almost deprecated models, you're not running through as much as you need to, which means it's cheaper for you. It's better energy producing, or better energy conservation, right? Like, this solves so many things on top of just being more efficient, more powerful, and giving you the best of the best.
Yeah. And this is actually the function that happens inside any like chat or Claude model, right? Because this is the thing that, and I was actually shared this on the training yesterday. If you give a request, just a standard request in Claude or chat, it will source the cheapest model to fulfill that request, right? Because of course, these are companies that, why spend a lot of money to have you run this simple request on a Ferrari if it is equally, all you need is a Toyota. And so the model itself already is essentially analyzing your prompt for what's the best model to do that. And so that basically auto selection, the auto switching between that. So that's already happening in an individual level. The difference is that you're still using OpenAI, or you're still only using Claude in those. So this basically opens that aperture to be like, look, it's a total paradigm change. The craziest thing is, like, I didn't see this 6 months ago. And not to give myself a hard time, but like, I don't think a lot of people saw this 6 months ago. Like, the race has been about an individual company that is going to achieve AGI first. And I'm like, I don't even think it's going to be any of those companies that will achieve AGI first.
Yeah. Now it opens it up to anybody.
Yeah.
I think that, because you sent me that link and I looked at it quickly, it doesn't have like a chat interface, right? So it's not like you can go to, however you pronounce it, .com, right? And start engaging with it, and it's used through APIs
this week.
This week.
I mean, right. So, I mean, yes, right now it's technical and right through APIs, but by next week, there'll probably be a chat interface.
Yeah, probably. So it will see early impacts from those who are like digging deep, who are looking at these niche things like you are, of what else is out there outside of the big 3 or 4, right?
Yeah.
And what else can I leverage? So you'll probably hear more about that as it comes out.
Yeah. Well, and I think it will make people feel a little more comfortable with like so like even Chinese models. So there was this interesting study a few weeks ago how more and more American companies have actually defaulted to using DeepSeek and other Chinese models, mainly because the cost for compute, like, they're just way, way, way cheaper. This like that's a hard thing for some organizations to actually digest and to share with their stakeholders, like, oh, we're using Chinese models to perform our thing. But this kind of masks that in a way, and it diffuses some of the risk, sort of. But I would say there are companies be like, oh, we use an aggregator. Like, I mean, even honestly, like you and I's Data Robot, there's like how many models in Data Robot? Thousands of models. We don't know which ones are US based and which ones are not. They're just models that exist or almost pre-vetted into this like aggregate pool. And so that changes the perception of that risk tolerance a bit.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's wild. That's going to have some.
Yeah, it's a small thing that happened just a couple days ago. And I'm like, but this is not small. It's actually huge. It really changed my view on, and I shouldn't be surprised anymore how often that happens. Because I mean, the first time when Sherry and Koshi sent me a NotebookLM on a Saturday morning, and I'd never heard of NotebookLM, it literally came out the day before. And it's same exact kind of feeling, like my whole body just went like numb for a second. I'm like, wait a minute, like, is this what I think it is? And he's like, yeah, it is. And it ended up being that. And it's just wild. So it's just, those are feelings that you would think that you'd have like once or twice in your life. But in AI, they're happening like every 6 months.
Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah. So stay tuned. Wild. Yeah, stay tuned. We'll put the link for Sakana Fugu. You can read about it. The show notes. I don't know, anything else, anything you're working on or having fun with or throwing a shoe at your AI for?
No, the thing that I've been tackling with is just LinkedIn. I'm having such a hard time on LinkedIn, man. Like the same text over and over. I'm like, sometimes I get duped. Sometimes I'll be reading somebody's post and I'm like, a paragraph or two in, and then I see one of those things like, here's the quiet part out loud, like all those different indicators. And it just makes it hard for me to want to go there. So I was talking to my brother-in-law about this and he's like, well, where do you think it's going to go? Because like there are people that like I never saw a post on LinkedIn before that are now posting like every day, right? Yeah. And like diatribes of stuff, like just throwing it out there because, well, why the hell not, right? And so it reminded me of, do you remember when COVID came and everybody was jumping on Clubhouse?
Yeah. Yeah,
right. Because they were popular. So overwhelmed with like the video and being on camera, but they wanted something that's just like pure genuine and like you're completely vulnerable. It's just like go on, you chat, whatever it is. I feel like there's got to be some shift towards LinkedIn is encouraging you to use AI to write your posts.
Right.
Right. Like there's got to be some shift to just human first, like solely human interactions.
So yeah, it's different than human first because you can still like I'm human first, but and to be honest, like AI really helps me synthesize my ideas and express things. I'm not a good writer.
Yeah.
But I spend to write an article, it takes me 6 hours with an AI to do that, 4 to 6 hours probably back and forth. If I'm probably closer to 6, but it used to take me 12. I mean, and it used to be a painful exercise, and now it's an exercise that brings me joy. But I wrote an article on community being a growth industry as a reverberation from everything synthetic. So like, I think it's not just AI first, but it's AI or a human first. It's human only. Like, what is the human only platform?
Yeah.
And I do think people will gravitate to that. Like Clubhouse was exactly that, but it was about 12 minutes that it was actually cool for. Because people totally bastardized it really quick. It ended up being like a place where gangs were, remember that? It ended up like drug dealers and thugs started using it to like figure out where the deals were going to happen. That's what happened. It like Clubhouse went down this really dark hole really quickly, which goes back to the entire premise that I always bring up around any conversation around AI ethics ends with how much faith you have in the human race.
Okay. So human exclusive, but unless you're a gang.
Right.
If you're a gang or a drug dealer,
they'll use it.
You will be excluded.
They'll just, whatever. They're just guaranteed it will be used for that. No, I think it's interesting. I do think it's a resurgence back to like handmade craft to things that are just truly a note that actually is like done with a human hand and pen. I mean, I find it to be more valuable for myself than ever. Like those, I mean, whether it's gardening or writing or whatever it might be, like by hand, like it feels authentic because so much of the world, like, let's be real, like AI is run out of human generated content. So it's now AI is eating AI. And it was Nicholas Thompson was talking, your best friend, was about how it's like kind of like mad cow disease. and like AI is eating AI at this point. And
Yeah.
so like, I don't know if you've seen those, like anytime the word lighthouse shows up in any short
Oh,
story,
yeah.
it's like AI is just because these
There's this
AIs were,
one name that keeps getting repeated.
Elias something.
Yeah.
Um,
Ferber or something like that.
right.
Yeah.
Because they basically trained these models so tightly on like what not to say that it just figured out that lighthouse was safe. And so it just started using, but then it becomes a little bit, the crazy thing is, right, because they don't actually know why as much they're doing this,
Yeah.
but they think that it's because it was what lighthouses were permissible, but because of like the AI mad cow disease, it just like AI started just like training on
Going crazy.
itself and
Yeah.
then using lighthouse and everything. But yeah, those other
Same
things,
with the
yeah,
gremlins and the ghouls and all the stuff.
the
and
goblins and the troll. Yeah, yeah, I
And
know,
yeah,
it's hilarious.
I use AI to like help me polish a thought because I'm not a writer. Like I like numbers better than words, but I want to get my ideas out there. But I've found that I've been pulling back even more because there's always new indicators of AI written stuff. And I caught one the other day of like the gap. Like you'll see the gap everywhere. There's a
Right.
gap between this and that.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's not on any of the list, but like as soon as you see it, you'll know. And I'm like, I don't want to write something and it passes all my tasks. And then 2 minutes later, like something, and then my whole thing gets discredited by a reader because of that one indicator that I used AI.
Yeah, I mean, the best indication of this is like M dash. Like M dashes have been around. When I reread my grandfather's book, there's M dashes through the entire book. Like,
Yeah.
But now people read it and they're like, oh, that's AI generated because of M dash. It's not necessarily true.
Right.
I also think about what changes what. Like, is AI changing how we speak and how we read, or are we changing how AI speaks and reads too? So there is, because some of those things like the where it says like the question nobody's asking or the gap or whatever, those weren't prominent a year ago. Right.
And so it's changing all the time.
But it will always, but I think all speech always changes anyway, because words that we used 10 years ago are not even still the same words that we use today and how we describe things. So I think part of it is not just how AI is influencing us, but how we influence AI. But yeah, it's hard. Like if AI can help me communicate an idea better than I could do it on my own in a more thoughtful, strategic, and factual way, then I think it's beneficial. But it definitely needs to be something where like my process is so iterative where I go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's not easy. But like a lot of people, yeah, they're hitting that button, be like, generate my thing.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll edit a word or something. When it comes down to it, like it should all be your idea. Like my prompting, which I showed live yesterday, like my prompting is again that brain dump in voice. So it can be literally like a 30 to 40 minute conversation of me rambling about stuff, arguing with the AI, like telling it to go screw off and then come back and be like, okay, go deeper. Like if you do that, I feel like your soul ends up being represented in an article or whatever you're writing in a way that, frankly, there's no way I could do as well on my own without having to go back to school and get a master's in creative writing or something. So yeah, it's kind of wild.
I do think it all has to be driven by the individual. Like I just don't know. Is that happening all the time? Like
no, it's clearly not. Like you and I both know, like most of the stuff. The thing about me with LinkedIn, I think the algorithm is completely garbage. It does the same thing that Instagram or Facebook does, which rewards conflict and honestly, like really stupid things, like things that are not consequential. And when you try to write something that's serious, that like you feel like could be of value, it will be deprioritized. And I told you about this, like I went on to Marketplace last night. I hate Facebook so much. And I still I love Marketplace, but I go on and the first thing, it never opens to Marketplace. It opens to Facebook. And the very first thing, which I get off of immediately, I just go down to the button to Marketplace, was these two like 82-year-old twin men doing like this little dance jig. And they're like, thanks so much for helping us hit 2 million followers. And it blew my freaking mind. And I clicked on their next thing and that's not even true. They have like 2.2 or 2.4 million followers. And all of their videos are these two guys like doing the Macarena, but they're not well. Like they're not sharing wisdom with the world. They're not like telling jokes that you could pass down to your children. I just had to like tap out. I'm like, I just cannot. I literally wanted to just like throw my phone, because someone who like takes their role seriously and like, I feel like I have something to share with the world and you don't have to agree with it or agree or disagree, but it's like there's an idea or a novel thought. Versus that, I'm like, that's what's being rewarded. And that's what, even on LinkedIn, which is videos are all being rewarded, and they're just nonsense. Most of them, not all of them. Anyway, thanks for the rant.
I mean, how else do you want to end a podcast?
Always with the rant. All right. Well, it's been fun. I don't know. I think we have another podcast coming up. See you soon.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we have another podcast coming. I just don't know when it is.
Sometime. The listener will hear it when it comes out, I'm sure.
We'll keep you posted and all that. It probably the next time something really good happens or bad, then we'll let you know.
So, 2 hours.
As of now, right. Yeah. The entire future of AGI and ASI has changed overnight. So there you go. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fundraising AI podcast.
Thanks all.